Hi, this is your host Abdul Bhartiya, and welcome to another episode of TFR Let's Talk. And today we have with us once again Moti Rafalin, CEO and co-founder at vFunction. Moti, it's great to have you on the show.
My pleasure, Swapnil. Happy to be here again.
Since, of course, as I said, we have hosted you folks earlier, but it's been a gap, and it's also always good idea to refresh memories of our viewers. So tell us quickly about vFunction.
Sure. So, indeed, we met, I think, almost 2 years ago when we founded the company, when we launched the product. We developed an AI platform for application modernization. So, we developed basically a platform that allows organizations, developers, and architects to analyze and transform monolithic applications into microservices. And of course, that has to do with cloud migration or technical debt or all kinds of reasons that lead organizations to modernize their applications. We can go deeper into that later.
Right. And as you really said, it's been a couple of years since we talked. A lot of things have happened since we talked to each other. COVID happened, which actually accelerated digital transformation or, move to cloud journey. By this time, we would assume that, hey, almost like 99.9% companies have already moved to the cloud or digitally transformed, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So if I ask you, what is the situation, state of, applications today? That will also help us go deeper into this topic.
Yeah, so I think that the reality can't be further from what you just described. I think we're in the early innings of the cloud migration, right? So yes, the low-hanging fruit, the simple applications that can be lifted and shifted are already in the cloud. New applications are being developed, cloud native. That's great. But I would argue that 81% of the workloads are still not in the cloud. So the majority of the back end of the global 2000 are still on-prem and they're not in the cloud. So yeah, we're definitely in the early innings of this transformation.
Are there cases where folks should move to look? Digital transformation is totally different thing than moving to the cloud. We can bundle them together, but that is not the reality. But there are a lot of use cases where you may be totally fine running things on prem. But when we talk about cloud, we also talk about cloud native, which is not a thing but way of doing things. So you may still be doing a lot of things locally, but you may embrace that practice CI/CD pipelines, agile model. So talk a bit about uh, what do you think is driving this move towards the whole DevOps culture? Because I mean, we cannot talk about what is driving at the adoption of digital transformation. That is the reality. You have to move towards that. But let's talk about that.
So yeah, it's great that you bring this up. So let's unpack for a second, the migration to the cloud. You're right. Cloud is not just a place; it's a concept, and indeed the concept, right? The development processes, being agile, CI/CD, microservices, all those things can actually happen also on-prem. What we are seeing, and I think that this is really the big opportunity and the challenge that is out there in the market, is that people were migrating to the cloud and hoping to get all the benefits that come from the cloud concept without actually doing the work that is needed to transform these applications to cloud native, right? So you've had organizations shifting their workloads to the cloud without modernizing them, without doing the heavy lifting of transforming those legacy architectures into cloud native, mainly microservices. And so they wouldn't get the benefits of let's say scalability, right? You don't get the elasticity. If you have a monolithic application, you can scale it out, right? You don't get the accelerated engineering velocity if it's a monolith, right? You need to break it into those microservices that allow you to deploy each of those services separately, right? With well-defined interfaces that allows your entire organization to be agile, more efficient. So, the ability to ramp up developers, again, if you have a monolithic application, you can't do that rapidly, and so all those things force you at the end of the day to try to break these applications into microservices so you can reap those benefits that the cloud concept brings. And again, that could be in public cloud, could be on-prem, But again, you need to do that type of transformation, that heavy lifting.
As you were saying earlier also, that a lot of smaller applications, folks were, able to move it quickly. But when it comes to, there are still, and it's not just application, there are industries like telecommunication. Of course, they are moving electrical, the grids, they are moving, they are embracing digital transformation, they are at a very early phase. What are some of the biggest challenge they face? Of course, if you have a legacy application that has been developed for the last 50 years, yeah, it's a big challenge. But what do you see there, and how does vFunction tackle that? You folks are also announcing, a hub. So let's talk about the problem areas and how do you approach them?
Sure. So I would divide that into two categories of challenges. One that has to do with the accumulation of technical debt that manifests itself in long test cycles and long release cycles, right? So now you have long test cycles, long release cycles. It prevents you from being innovative. It prevents you from being able to address the business needs, right? It prevents you from ramping up developers, and at the end of the day, it impacts the user and the customer experience, right? So that has to do just simply with the accumulation of technical debt, the fact that you have very large applications that are very hard to maintain. And the other category has to do with scalability. And I'll give you a simple example. Let's say there's this bank, they have the backend application, they wanted to add a mobile app, they put an API into that backend, and all of a sudden the traffic goes 10 times higher, right? Because once you have, your bank account in your mobile, you obviously go in many more times than you would go on your computer. So again, the traffic went up 10x. Now they had to modernize the backend. There was no other way to address that type of challenge. So again, breaking the backend into microservices that allows them then to scale them out and be able to respond to the traffic needs. So these are the two challenges, right? The accumulation of technical debt, the fact that you need to address scalability. And when you move to the cloud, it's only a catalyst to do that type of modernization, so you can take advantage of the modern cloud services, right? Let's say serverless, Kubernetes, all those things that the cloud has to offer. If you don't modernize, you're not able to reap those benefits. So again, the cloud migration, adopting the cloud, is a catalyst to modernize the application in order to reap the benefits that the cloud has to offer. And I'll give you maybe one more example, or maybe two examples, just in terms of industries, right? The competitive pressures are what drive are the things that are driving these industries to modernize. If you think about financial services, you have all these fintech startups out there that have modern stacks that are able to deliver features very, very quickly at a very high rate. And you have the traditional banks that have these monolithic applications that have been around for 15, 20 years. Sometimes they have mainframe. They're not able to respond to these competitive pressures. They're not able to deliver, services to specific verticals, to specific audiences. So they have to modernize. They need to do that. I'll give you another example that is very close to my heart. Take, for example, Tesla, right, in the automotive industry. So Tesla, that's a software company, right? The experience that users of Tesla have is amazing, right? They have their mobile app, they can order the service, they can get alerts about their car, they can pay for their insurance, pay for their lease, do everything from the application. If you compare that to the traditional automotive companies, again, they have these legacy applications. They're not able to deliver those services. So again, they have to modernize these applications. And this brings me to what vFunction does, right? So we developed a platform to help these organizations transform these legacy applications, these monolithic applications, into microservices using AI and automation. And we're able to basically accelerate that process by 20 to 30 times, reduce the cost at least half or up to two thirds. And the biggest advantage is the risk reduction, right? So all of a sudden you don't embark on a 2-year project, but it's rather 2 months project, and that makes a huge difference for the CIO or the CTO when they're evaluating a project and putting their reputation on the line for those types of projects.
Of course, you folks are also working on technical solutions. Can you also talk a bit about how much cultural changes are also needed in the kind of, which also means the mindset, not just top down approach, it could be bottom approach also. It depends on the industry as well, where it depends on how far along you are in that. But if you can also talk about the mindset, if you also helps companies in helping with, because moving to cloud or cloud native is not a product switch. Your teams need to become agile as well, because the velocity of development will change. You are not releasing a product every 20 years. You have to keep up with, because the libraries you're using, they will become outdated by like 2 or 6 months, or so. So talk about the cultural aspect that is there, and how important is that?
There are multiple dimensions to this, right? So first, yes, there's the mindset that you want to change your processes. You want to change also the organizational structure, right? So if you move from a monolith into microservices, that may require change in the organization, which also adds friction to this type of transformation. It's a completely new mindset, right? That you're able to deliver features on separate domains. So you have separate release trains for separate domains within your application. That's something that if you had a monolith, you couldn't do before. These are things that I think that the developers want to do that, right? Developers want to work on modern technologies. They want to adopt modern processes. So there's definitely a push from new developers to do that. Maybe there are those that are kind of comfortable with the old way, but it's there is this saying that it's pretty kind of in your face, that it's modernize or die, right? So these organizations, if they don't modernize, they face extinction. So I don't want to sound too dramatic, but these are the rules of the game, right? This is capitalism. If you're not competitive, if you don't offer better services, more features, you have to modernize. So it's necessity. It's not even optional.
As these kind of legacy or traditional companies do kind of move and plan towards digital transformation, modernization, or cloud native adoption, there are a lot of challenges. You earlier talked about technical debt. There is also a thing called tribal knowledge, where certain teams or certain folks within teams, they have the knowledge because they are the ones who have been doing that for 20 years. Nobody outside their team or within that one individual knows about that. So first of all, to talk a bit about how do you look at these two issues, or it could be more as well. This is once again falls into a cultural category. And what suggestion you would have for a company to kind of eliminate the technical debt and also distance themselves from tribal knowledge?
Yeah, so this is definitely a challenge with most of these legacy applications, that the developers that develop these applications are usually not around anymore. Like, if the applications that were developed 15 years ago, the developers that developed that are not there anymore. Either they retired or they've moved on, so they're not around. So that is definitely a challenge when you want to modernize an application, that those that develop the application are not around anymore. But this is exactly what vFunction is able to assist with, because what vFunction does, we didn't talk about kind of our platform, and I don't want to make this as a commercial to our platform, but explain the technology. What vFunction does, it basically learns the application, right? So you deploy the vFunction agent, and it's a production agent, like an APM agent. You leave it there in production for a few hours, a few days, and it basically sees the different flows in the application and learns really what are the flows and the functionality within the application, and then uses the machine learning to identify the specific domains, to identify the entry points, and it constructs the full call tree and identifies the entry points. And so at the end of that process, of the learning process, the vFunction platform presents to the architect, to the senior developer, sort of a very nice visualization of the different domains within the application, the interdependencies, and all that functionality. And so it is able to assist in regaining sort of the knowledge about this application. In fact, it also identifies dead code because it compares static and dynamic analysis. So it is able to really simplify the code. Once you use vFunction, it not only identifies the domains and helps you break them, it automatically creates the APIs, it also removes dead code. And so that also allows you then to maintain these services much more efficiently and basically overcomes that gap of the tribal knowledge that might not be around anymore.
The whole point of talking about this is to understand the problem and how they can help, because we can talk about problem whole day long, but what are we doing about it? That is more important. I think from the agenda of today's interview, I think I have most of it. Is there anything else that you feel we should cover?
I think there is one aspect that I would like to sort of highlight, and that is that the way that we see the world is that the more you modernize, the more value you get from the cloud. Okay, and if you think about it, there's a continuum there. You can start with migration, right? Rehost, replatform, what's called lift and shift, and you get some benefits from that, right? You get maybe some benefits on the security side, some benefits on the DevOps side, but you're not getting the maximum benefits, right? You don't get the accelerated engineering velocity, you're not getting the scalability, the agility. For that, you really need to either refactor, rewrite, basically modernize. And I think that people are a little bit confusing the term modernization to cover also just putting an application in a container. They call it modernization, but that doesn't really yield the benefits that we're talking about. For that, you need to go into the code and refactor it and break it into microservices. And so, again, that start with migration, but that doesn't give you all the benefits. To get the full benefits, you need to truly modernize, truly refactor the application, break it into microservices, and that's how you gain all the benefits or the maximum benefits from the cloud.
Moti, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about not only, of course, the new announcement, but the big challenge that is there in modernizing. And I really appreciate that you did, kind of help differentiate between modernizing an application versus just, bringing it to a container world by rewrapping it. So thanks for, sharing those insights as well. And let's not have our meetings like 2 years gap. Okay, let's try to talk more frequently. And
I would love that,
because I will. Yeah, so I look forward to our next discussion. But I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Swapnil. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.